Thank you guys in advance. So I will talk about creating Azure policy with a little bit of twist. So there will be a backdoor at the end. So my name is Viktor Gazdag. I'm a principal security consultant at NCC Group, and I'm specialized in cloud and CI/CD security. I also have a bunch of Azure-related certification, and I also presented a few times at different conferences. So I will talk about Azure policy. So Azure policy evaluates resources and actions in the environment by comparing the resource properties and the business rules. So what it means is a business rule can be something like you are only allowed to create a resource in European regions. So like in US West, you can't do any or you can't create any resources. So I will just quickly talk about how can you create and how a policy looks like, and then we will move on and see, and I will talk about how can you twist it and abuse it and create a backdoor account. So Azure policy is written in JSON, and it's called a policy definition. And if you group multiple definitions together, then it will call policy initiative. And you have to assign these policies to a scope, which can be resource or resource group, management group, or subscription. So where the policy will apply, that's the scope. And as an additional optional thing, you can do something like remediation when you have a non-compliant resources that the policy found, and then you can run a remediation task, and it will fix your resources, so it will be compliant. This is a very basic skeleton of an Azure policy. Hopefully you can see it. If not, at the end of my presentation, I will show a link where you can download the slides itself. It's on a GitHub repository. So this is how it looks like. A very basic one. You have a property that will contain like usual metadata stuff like name, description, or if you want to reuse and not hard-coded the values, you can use parameters. And the main thing is the policy rule, which will have an if-then branch, which is the logical evaluation and the effect itself. So, for example, the if branch will, I'm looking for resources like storage accounts that has no encryption, then I want to do something, and that's the effect part. So maybe I want to audit them, or I won't allow it to be created. This is just a summary of the policy. And you might not see it, but this is actually more than 200 lines. So you can make complex policies like this. So instead of the first 10 lines, we can see it's more than 200 lines. So how can you write this policy? What do you need to do this? So you will need a resource type, which is storage account or virtual machine. And these resource type or resources have properties like encryption, or does the storage account has HTTPS forced or not, and so on. In order to access these properties, you need to use and call or check the policy alias. And I will show you how can you do this. So here are some commands and tools that you can look for these properties and aliases, like the Azure CLI or deployment template or the Resource Explorer. So I will start with an example. In the top right, you will see the storage account, and I made or highlighted it with black that we are looking for a security property. It says require secure transfer for REST API operations. So this is basically the secure channel or HTTPS traffic. On the other side, you can see a deployment template. And you see that within the properties, there is something called supports HTTPS traffic only. So these two are the same thing. And that property, you will have to look for its alias, and that's what we will use in the policy rule itself. So as you can see, I highlighted it with yellow. There is actually two. One is storage account, and the other one is the storage account / supports HTTPS traffic only. So you will need to use the full path of the alias. And it's also very important to try and check the values of these aliases, because you might see or expect something to be null or null, but when you check it, it's actually empty or true or false. So, and your policy won't work. This is the Resource Explorer. Here you can list all the service provider or the resource type, like the storage account in this example, and it will show you all the aliases that you can use in the policy itself. This is an Azure CLI that will show you for the first slides about the three pictures. So again, I'm listing all the aliases from the storage account, and then I'm just looking for that supports HTTPS traffic only, so I filter it. So I will get the full path of the alias. I just put here some other examples and the comments so you can copy it out, but the second one is using the getAZ policy alias. This one is using databases and looking for the backup property to get the aliases. So before I move on, I want to emphasize that this is for Azure and Azure resources, and not for Entra ID or Azure AD, because the scope itself, if you remember, it's resource group, management group, and so on. So you can't really check something like if this user has, I don't know, his name is or her name is 12 character long or not. If you worked or know a little bit about cloud, then you know that usually there is something custom or managed. This is here the same case. Managed policy is created and managed by Azure. The custom policy is written by you. These are the two permissions that's required to create the policy itself. So you might not need too much. You only need more permissions if you create a remediation task and run more commands or do other tasks, because your managed identity will require more permissions to run those tasks. So how often it's running these policies? The policy will run if a new resource is deployed within the scope or is getting updated. Otherwise, it's every 24 hours, it will run at least once. Or you can do it on demand. Here is an Azure CLI just to trigger the policy run the first time faster, because usually there is some delay, like 10-15 minutes for the policy until it kicks off. So now it will be a little bit more interesting. So I will talk about enumeration, and then I will talk about the backdoor account. So these are the two use cases that I will talk about, and you can twist the policy. And these cases are basically for post-exploitation tasks. Or if you are limited using, for example, you can't use Azure CLI, then you can create a policy and then you can have the same results, but I will tell you how. So the first one will be listing the storage accounts, all the storage accounts within the subscription, for example. The other one is we will look for only those that have anonymous access, so everyone can access it. And the last one is you are interested in all the virtual machines that has public IP address, because you might want to, connect back. So it's a very simple example, because you are only interested in storage accounts, so it's very wide scope, I would say. So you're not really filtering to very specific stuff. You're only interested in the storage account. So what you will use in the policy rule is the Microsoft.storage/storage accounts. So that's the alias that you are looking for. And this is the whole policy itself that you will do the assignment. How can you do this? So when you check the deployment template of an existing resource in the Azure portal, for example, you will see that there is a properties, and I highlighted the, this is the second example, when we are looking for the anonymous access within the storage access, storage accounts. So you check the deployment template, and I highlighted it will be called allow block public access. So that will tell if someone, or if there is anonymous access enabled or disabled. And you can use the Azure CLI to look for this string, and you will get the full path. And then you will first look for the storage accounts, and then you will filter again for the allow block public access alias. Don't be fooled, because you can use Boolean and other operators. So in this case, it will use not. So we are not looking for those public access which are false. So it's just like a reverse or a negative filtering. And this is the whole policy itself. So I usually recommend not to create one by yourself, because they are JSON and very fragile. So I think it's better if you're looking for an Azure policy that's already written and you just modify it. I think it's a lot easier. Otherwise, you can broke it very easily, unless you use with your IDE some extension that will highlight and correct your JSON syntax. So the last example for the enumeration is virtual machines with external IP addresses. Maybe you already have an account for the virtual machine that you backdoored or something like that. And this way, you can get all the IP addresses. And you don't have to write anything, because this is an already existing policy. So in some cases, you don't even have to do or write any policy, because it already exists. And the policy itself is just looking for the network interfaces. And within the network interfaces, we are interested in the IP configurations. You see the brackets and star because it's an array. So within the array, the elements that we are looking for is the public IP address. And again, it's just using the not and not like. So it's like a reverse filtering. And yeah, this is just the whole policy itself. So there are basically two types of backdoors with Azure policy. The first one is, I won't really talk about too much, I will just mention it, is the custom policy with the modify or append effect. So when the policy kicks in and found some non-compliant resources, then it will modify or try to append things to the resource. But Zender Mackey already wrote a blog post about it and talked about as well in other conferences. So I just wanted to mention if you are interested in this. The other one is a custom policy that using the deploy if not exist effect and deployment script. So I will show a demo video as well, and I will talk about what's happening and what I'm used as a proof of concept code and policy. So the policy itself will look for a storage account that has HTTPS enabled or disabled. And then, because we will find some of these resources, I will use the deploy if not exist effect. And with this, I will also assign or do a remediation task. So I want to fix those, storage accounts. And my remediation task will be basically running a deployment script. So that's the cool part. So there will be some role assignments because the remediation task requires a managed identity to run all those steps. And there is a nested deployment template that contains a deployment script, which the deployment script is basically just a PowerShell script where you can write and do all the tasks that you want to do. And what is the cool thing is you don't need to include it in the deployment template. The script itself, you can reference it. So in my case, it can be an external URL. And in my case, I put it in a GitHub repository. So what my PowerShell script will do is it will create a service principal. And once it's created, I will submit it to a website that I control and own. So I will have the secret, the tenant ID, the app ID, and so on, so I can log in or log back. The policy itself, as I mentioned, run every 24 hours, but I will talk about this as the problem as well, that the remediation task only run once, and that's the biggest problem. Because I was experimenting with the script, in the video you will see additional tasks, like I will create two additional managed identity or another storage account, and so on. This is a picture just to summarize and visualize what's going on. So we will, when I do the remediation task, I will need a managed identity, and there will be a role assignment because the managed identity doesn't necessarily have the permissions. There will be a nested deployment template that will contain the deployment script. The deployment script will be in the GitHub repository. And we will need to have a storage account where this deployment script will be downloaded. And because we are using the deployment script, Azure will automatically create and run an Azure container instance for us. And it will mount the storage account, and it will run from that storage account the PowerShell script. So just quickly, the elements: storage account, managed identity, container instance, deployment or deployment template, deployment script, and GitHub or website. So these are the elements that is required. And I will show you now the video. Oh, I have to. No? Just a second. Sorry, guys. I can see. Thank you. So as you can see, there are no compliance reports at the moment. And there are no assignments, so no policy were assigned. There are some existing policies, that's some of them that I already created, but I will create now a new one. You will just have to place it in the subscription, name it, use a category. It's not really matter this time. And I will copy the policy that I will use. I will talk about the policy itself as well. We need a role definition ID or role ID that's for the managed identity to run the task. There will be some duplication because I modified an example and I will just have to fill out some form. So here you can see on the subscription level, there are only two role assignments exist. Here is the already existing resources. I have 2 storage accounts, 1 managed identity that I will use, and some other resources. So this is the PowerShell script on the GitHub repository. This will be downloaded and run. So you can see some of the commands that, like creating or getting a storage account, creating it, or I download the Azure CLI, and I will install it, and then I will create the service role. Some of the values are hard-coded because I was, trying stuff out, but you can, change those things easily. Here is the policy itself, and I'm looking for storage accounts, and also those storage accounts that have the HTTPS set to false. And then the role definition ID, that's the owner. Then you will see here the deployment templates, the nested deployment templates. And then I will highlight, so that license 1.ps1, that's the same PowerShell script that you see in the GitHub repository, in the same URL. Now I will assign the policy to the subscription level, so everything in the subscription will be checked. This is some leftover. Basically, I have to fill out where the container instance will be created, which resource group, and then which storage account will be used to download that script, and so on, and which managed identity I will use. It's again, I have to do this because now I had the policy, but I will use a remediation task as well. And to run the remediation task, you need the managed identity. This window, you can see that I just start a simple Python web server. I highlighted my IP address. This is where I will receive the service principal credentials. And that's the same IP that I highlighted here in the script. So the video is heavily edited because it's like around 8 minutes, but in reality, everything was at least half an hour. So my talk is half an hour, so I can't do the talk and the live demo, so that's why it's heavily edited. So I did the assignments. We see that the policy was created, the assignment was done. And then in the compliance menu, you will see the status changes of the policy, and later the remediation task. So not started again with a little icon. And then I think it will finish or complete. So yeah, non-compliant because it found at least one resource that was non-compliant. So once it's non-compliant, the remediation task will run. Otherwise, the remediation task won't run because there is no resource to run on. Here you can see the remediation task. So it's evaluating. We are not seeing it yet. It takes a lot of time to kick off and run the remediation task itself. I think in my case it was like 10-15 minutes. But because of some magic editing, we are seeing it now. So I received, so the remediation task created, run the PowerShell script, and created the service principal. And later in the video, I will log in and list the resources. So it's still in progress because the web server didn't terminate the connection. But this way, I can show you that like new resources are created, and the container instance that I talked about running this script is still running because the web server didn't terminate. And the storage account was created. The new managed identities were also created at subscription level and resource group level as well. And then I will terminate soon the web server. Also, you can see all the steps that were run in the or by the PowerShell script. So there is a deployment script that will contain all the outputs. So I stopped it now. The remediation task will complete because there were no errors during the execution. And now I will use these this credential to log in. I show the password because the service principal is already deleted, so it's not existing anymore. But here you can see that I will just copy things. So the hardest part wasn't creating this, but actually copy out the password. Or actually the app ID, as you can see, because I just can't get the last string, so it will take a little time, but bear with me, it will work. So now you can see the login was successful, and I will just use the Azure CLI login and then just list the resources. So you can see it's the same name that I highlight here are the same that I will show in the portal after highlighting these. Yeah, so the same manage identity, the storage account, and so on. And that was the video. Okay, so there are a lot of problems with this proof of concept code, but you can fix most of the things. So it requires a lot, and if you fix the last remaining 3 tasks, then it will require a lot more. Basically, everything is in the audit log. I will show you the screenshots after this. Everything is in the audit log, that you created a managed identity, did the role assignment, and so on. Also, the script got downloaded from the GitHub repo to the storage account. So if you want to fix those things, you have to delete the logs and delete the storage account and so on. And the biggest problem is the remediation task run only once, but if you write a PowerShell script that creates a policy again, then you can loop it and loop. So once you open the policy itself, then you will see an activity logs tab, and it will show you all the steps that were run by the policy and the remediation task itself. This is just the role assignment that my account did to the managed identity when the remediation task happened. And then this is when the PowerShell script ran and created a service principal and did the role assignment to that service principal. This is the storage account that we used to download the deployment script and the Azure CLI, and that was mounted into the Azure container instance. So there are a lot of, leftover things. This one is from Entra ID because we messed about managed identities and service principal. So you will see here everything again that it was created, or the role assignment and so on. So that's it. I included 4 slides of links that will help you learn and how to create a policy and remediation task. The first one is about all the custom and managed policies that you can find on the internet. So there are like hundreds of them, so you can reuse them for your own purposes. The next one is how to write and the other people's experiences to create a remediation task or a custom Azure policy that uses deploy if not exists effect. The third one is the same. And the last one is some people used in a different ways to do privilege escalation, the Azure policy itself, so you can read about this. But that's it, and thank you for your attention. I don't know if we have time for questions or are there any questions? Thank you.
We absolutely have time for questions, so let's get going. Hands up if you have a question so I can see you. If I don't see you, just wave. Not yet. No one is mustering up the courage to ask a question. Well, I'll start with one that's more related to mindset. So in the course of this research, what was an aha moment that kind of made you want to dive deeper and really get into the nuts and bolts of it? Because it was super detailed and very practical.
So the whole idea came from an AWS talk or article that was basically created a Lambda function and used the event that Lambda function is deleted. So basically, I don't remember the full details, but you couldn't delete the Lambda function because it was created again and again. So I wanted to create something with Azure policy or with SCP in AWS, but it's not how it works, as I read in AWS, but I found out that in Azure policy, or with Azure policy, you can basically do the code execution. And it's, I wanted to do also a different way, not just a Azure CLI or automation account, but like in another new, maybe an edge case, but like a new way of doing a code execution and create a backdoor.